is a contention.
That's true.
That's true.
All right. Hello. I would like to start by saying I am a registered independent and don't side with either current political ideology in the U.S. 100%. I have two goals today to accomplish, and one of those is to show that Donald J. Trump was the better choice in the 2024 U.S. presidential election, having the choice be between the formerly mentioned and Kamala Harris of the Democratic Party. That being said, the other point of contention I will set to achieve is to prove that Donald Trump is indeed not a fascist. So let's get into it. My first point will be me proving that Donald Trump, our current president, is in fact not a fascist. This is for many reasons, of which I shall name. After that, I will define some generalizations and show how even those can lead you astray. After, I shall get into the thick of defining fascism. Fascism. Fascism is a very, very interesting term because it is known among those of political and historical literacy that it is nearly nigh essentially impossible to define without examples or an essay. Few have come to a conclusion of this, but there have been many that have tried, and even some coming close, but I would like to preface by saying that if you're searching for a quick statement of words to effectively define fascism, you will not find it here nor anywhere else. Roger Griffin, a historian that is generally accepted to have gotten closest, states in the book titled Fascism by Roger Griffin that fascism is a genus of political ideology whose mythic core, in its various permutations, is a palingenetic form of populist ultra-nationalism. Wow, this is a stunning quote. It's not very useful. Only those who already understand fascism can see how it even works. Fascism is dangerous and is one of the most misused and frequently wronged words in political discourse. Now, obviously, what happens when a word is misused and mislabeled so frequently is that the word itself's meaning either changes or becomes meaningless. Either of these will be an absolute detriment and travesty to our language and culture, not to mention a spit in the face to those that have created, succumbed, or been affected by its reaches. Not only because almost every time it's been introduced into a civilization, it caused mass ruin and loss to everyone involved, but also because every time it has been introduced, it turned the tides of history, making deep-rooted and long-lasting connections that are felt every day by many people, just to make a cheap headline. So, I'm stating that misusing this word is a genuine disservice to everything it stands for. Now, I'm going to state some qualifying generalizations that can help to spot a fascist party/community. These things are not an ironclad box, but rather a framework that requires further investigation from scenario to scenario. For example, Nazism is on the opposite side of the political spectrum of Italian fascism, but both were generically fascist. 1. Extreme nationalism, which lies at the core of fascism, is what makes the movement hard to spot in the first place, because of culture, value, identity, etc. For example, an English fascist utopia would look very different than a Mexican fascist utopia, just for many examples, differences in the culture and stuff like that they would put at the higher value. 2, there's no inherent end goal to fascist regimes, other than the vague, emotionally charged idea of a nation's greatness, which you could argue that every form of government is to better the lifestyle and identity of a nation and to unite for the betterment of the nation. Fascism creates what it hates and is purely negative. Few movements are viewed this way. It is specifically titled as anti-individualist, anti-liberal, anti-conservative, anti-democratic, anti-Marxist, and anti-capitalist. Fascist regimes have even acted in disagreement with these aforementioned antis, which makes it even harder to define. Fascism is more of a set of philosophies and methods. These things also appear in many other forms of governments and parties, which inherently means that it is easy to see things in fascist regimes and assign those things to be the set definition of fascism. It's like when a person first learns about signs of mental illness from a psychology class and all of a sudden insists that all these people around them have certain mental illnesses from just normal human tendencies. I've personally seen a lot of people point to how fascists tried to silence the opposition and compare it to modern-day governments. But in reality, it was just a tool that was used by fascists. While I have said all of this, it is not all hopeless. There is indeed a way to define a true fascist regime. It just takes time and examples. So, in the book, Fascism, Comparison and Definition by historian Stanley G. Payne, he sets a very effective table that offers a very clean framework. Again, these are not set in stone, but can be very effective. The table is as follows. So, this is one of my images. Do you want me to send it to your phone? Or
You can just show me.
It's like words.
Oh.
Yeah.
I guess you could send it to me.
Okay.
Jackson's with his family.
Lame.
Dead ass.
Always with his family.
Lord forbid.
I know.
I'm gonna go get some water. I'll be right back.
All right, just a second.
Do you want me to read it? Or do you want to read it?
I can read it. Yeah.
Go for it, Luke.
So this is a table which lies the framework just tile at the top, and then there's an A, B, and C contention. Not contention, but statements. Ideology and goals, espousal of an idealist, vitalist, and voluntaristic philosophy, normally involving the attempt to realize a new, modern, self-determined, and secular culture, creation of a new nationalist authoritarian state not based on traditional principles or models, organization of a new, highly regulated, multi-class, integrated national economic structure, whether called national corporatist, national socialist, or national syndicalist, positive evaluation and use of or willingness to use violence in war, the goal of empire expansion or radical change in the nation's relationship with other powers, the fascist negations, anti-liberalism, anti-communism, anti-conservative, though with the understanding that fascist groups were willing to undertake temporary alliances with other sectors, most commonly with the right. C, style and organization. All right, there you go. Attempted mass mobilization with militarization of political relationships and style, and with the goal of mass party militia, emphasizes an aesthetic culture of meetings, symbols, and political liturgy, stressing emotional and mystical aspects. Extreme stress on the masculine principle and male dominance while espousing a strongly organic view of society. Exaltation of youth above other phases of life, emphasizing the conflict of generations, at least in affecting the initial political transformation, specific tendencies towards an authoritarian, charismatic, personal style of command, whether or not the command is to some degree initially elected. That's the table. I'll continue with my speech. Fascists love violence and actually encourage violence aside from the enactment of violence in the name of the will of the state. Fascists find violence to be therapeutic. They believe in violent Darwinian struggle. Fascist methodology. Fascists believe in mass mobilization. They believe that it is their duty to change society as a whole globally and essentially want control of everything. Fascists believe that the state is the religion and focus on symbology and marches to induce not just a political movement, but a spiritual one as well. Fascist movements are made up of men and pay almost no attention to women or equal rights. It obsesses with the perceived strength and will of the male gender. Fascism is inherently revolutionary and claims to rebirth a nation. And since the children are the future of the nation, it focuses a great deal on the youth and appeals to them in specific ways. Fascism dictates the want of militarized government institutions, essentially a party militia that executes all will of the party. Now that we have a framework and outline of fascism, I believe it is evident that Donald Trump, our current president, is not a fascist and does not execute fascist ideology. Again, fascism is inherently negative and is an objectively unenjoyable society of false revolutionaries bumbling about while attempting to brainwash the populace. So that was my first kind of thing. Second, Donald Trump was the better choice in the 2024 U.S. presidential election, having the choice be between the formerly mentioned and Kamala Harris of the Democratic Party. This statement is made from the evidence of many reasons of which it would take way too long to conversate in an effective way, so I will narrow it down to some of the biggest ones that stand out to me. Kamala Harris was not democratically elected to be the representative of the Democratic Party in the 2024 election. The Democratic Party does not have a good reputation in the current day because of the previously elected president. Along with that, Kamala Harris did not have a sufficient time to run her campaign, and yes, it may not be her fault, but I believe that our presidential candidate-elect should not be given the benefit of the doubt to get elected. On top of that, she was our vice president for 4 years and did not have many great results. And as a result of the short-lived campaign, Kamala did not make very many statements about things that she set out to achieve and change. So, when you have a representative that you don't know what they stand for, nor have you seen much of them, and they haven't done much in their past to make it precedent that they have a lot that they want to achieve, it makes it hard to compete with anyone, let alone a president with a good favorable track record. I would like to make a statement that I do not think Donald Trump is the most morally sound person, as I believe that he says a lot of things to induce jaw drops rather than actually intending to pursue those things. He's a very controversial person and thrives off of drama, but we can't ignore results. Donald Trump's policies and movements that he has put into place have been majority good. Do I believe that everything he has done has been amazing? No. But when you have a presidential elect with a clear-cut goal and belief in what a lot of people are feeling lacking in the American spirit today versus a candidate that seems to not say much and hasn't done much comparatively, it seems to be apparent why I believe that Donald Trump was the better candidate. So, have all of you seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yeah.
Okay. Here. See it? All right. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, made by Abraham Maslow, is an American psychologist, is a theory that states that there is an innate order of which human needs are preferred. And the Democratic Party tends to focus a lot more on the top of the pyramid, titled as self-actualization, which values achieving one's full potential, including creative activities, which these things are very attractive and mutually agreed upon to be a good thing. There's just one limitation that sees itself in the path of this. America is viewed as a complete mess across the world, with our lifestyle, international relations, and basic fundamentals of life. And at the current moment, because of these qualities we examine, we need to focus on some of the lower parts of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, such as safety. Safety needs, as stated, it stands for security and safety. We have had a lot of issues with people entering our border and taking our country and forcing us to trade with them because we played into it. Kamala Harris was sitting vice president while these issues have been at their height in recent years. Yes, I know she wants to control the border now, but she let it get this out of hand in the first place and handled it very poorly with former President Joe Biden. So, that being said, we also need to focus on the third rung of the pyramid titled belongingness and love needs, which stands for intimate relationships and friends. Our community has completely fallen apart and is in shambles, and our social capital is at an all-time low. This is one of the leading causes of mental illness in these record highs that we've been seeing. I truly do believe that Donald Trump will do a better job at achieving these needs rather than Kamala Harris. The Republican Party has screamed about America and uniting through a communally agreed upon goal to make America great again. Now, I'm not a 100% supporter of this movement, but you cannot deny that it is an attempt to unify people that want better than what we have been given. This boosts community and can help people socialize over similar interests and a care for your neighbor. These are all good qualities that a nation needs to succeed, and the Democratic Party has not prioritized this at all in recent years. It is commonly known how polarizing the Democratic Party can be depending on what you believe. Also, it is known by most that Donald Trump is very petty. It does not budge no matter who they are on the world stage. It can be a double-edged sword, but right now his good edge will help us more so than his poor edge will hinder us. Through military, through war, through defense, and through safety. Closing statement. Nearly every American politician is morally gray. It does not matter who it is. I truly, and by you as my witness, believe that Donald J. Trump and the Republican Party is the candidate that was the better choice in the 2024 U.S. presidential election and has most of his priorities in order on the broad scale. I don't think he is a good person by merit, and I don't think that Kamala Harris is a bad person by merit. I just believe, by my current knowledge, that my decision was the more profitable to the U.S. as a whole. True evil is a two-party system. That is my statement.
Thank you, Coda. I thought that was really good.
Thank you.
And I think Coda and I actually agree on a lot. So, a lot. Not to get political or anything, but we're just going to skip the preamble because this is long, and we're just going to go straight into foreign policy. And I'm going to look at Donald J. Trump's rhetoric surrounding Greenland has been concerning, to say the least. Trump has offered to buy the landmass from Denmark, which is fine and all, but he's also refused to rule out military force in the acquisition of Greenland. Now, do I think that the United States is going to use military force to annex Greenland? Probably not. Really, the Congress isn't going to buy that. Likely, it is a tool of negotiation. However, it is clearly unethical. Using violence to coerce an allied nation is unethical and unnecessary. The argument that is that control over Greenland is essential for world security, i.e. just keeping China out of the way. And that's according to Brady. While this fact is true, the United States under Truman already signed a treaty that gave the U.S. broad license to operate its military in Greenland. That was in 1951. That's according to Wartime. Allocating funding to this military bases in Greenland could help improve national security. However, there is no need for major political shifts. This can be accomplished through cooperation with NATO ally Denmark. The other reason Trump wants Greenland is for control of rare minerals such as lithium and titanium found in Greenland. These minerals are crucial in the manufacturing of technologies such as computer chips. China supplies 40 to 90% of the key mineral supplies globally. China having such a strong hold on the supply of minerals is risky because it could undermine American soft power and be used to disrupt American economic and military productivity. I agree with Donald J. Trump that the strengthening of mineral supply chains is crucial to economic security and prosperity. However, let's compare that to the Biden administration's handling of the topic. I will give Trump the benefit of only having been in office for 3 months, and at this point 6 months. I wrote this a long time ago. But I will also remind you that we already had a presidency under Trump. Under Biden, the Department of Energy allocated $3 billion across 25 projects with a bipartisan infrastructure law to extract, process, and recycle valuable minerals. By the way, Kamala Harris cast a tie-breaking vote in that in Congress. So the only reason we have it is because of her. In Biden's first week in office, he passed an executive order which required a 100-day review of critical mineral supply chains. Efforts were also made to support responsible mining, domestic mining, by focusing mining in areas like Nevada. With these investments into place, the United States is set to supply 1/5 of the global supply by 2030. In addition to the Infrastructure Act, Biden also joined in forming the Mineral Security Partnership, also known as the MSP. This partnership focuses on expanding mineral supply chain security, limiting China's influence in the matter. The partnership often works with non-partnered nations that are major mineral producers, such as Argentina, Mexico, Greenland, and Ukraine. These nations are part of the MSP forum. To summarize, the Biden administration already did a lot to expand mineral manufacturing and security in the United States. Trump did some too. During his first term, he created job growth promoting mineral mining within the nation. During the second term, he's also pushed for offshore drilling to compete with China. This is decent policy because it gives us a leg up in mineral security, but offshore drilling is also detrimental to the environment. Trump has also passed an executive order, immediate measures to increase American mineral production to increase mineral production in the United States. Notable from this executive order is that it speeds up at the rate at which permits are being handed out to open up new mines and related facilities. This raises concerns because by rushing permit processes, people fear that environmental goals will be pushed aside to meet mineral security goals. This being an executive order also weakens its ability to get anything substantial actually done. Since this is an executive order and not real legislature, it still relies heavily on what Congress is willing to fund. More likely, real progress will be made through legislature and cooperation with allied nations. Both are things which the Biden administration focused heavily on. That's why Trump's plan to purchase Greenland is so stupid and dangerous. Like stated before, the most effective way to counter China's hold on valuable minerals is through national cooperation. The Biden administration was actually able to pass laws like the Infrastructure Act to mobilize the United States production of minerals, and it created crucial alliances with other nations to stabilize and secure mineral supply chains. Trump, on the other hand, is focused on damaging these important relationships with these allies, such as Greenland and other MSP forum member Ukraine. Again, I don't really think it's likely that Trump will invade Greenland. However, if I were an important figure of Greenland, Denmark, or Europe, I would hold the passing threat of military power seriously. You want to take notes?
No.
Okay. With this, it is clear that Biden's administration handled the mineral crisis better. Kamala Harris's plan was a continuation of this. Harris would have maintained a healthy relationship with Greenland and Ukraine while also expanding mineral production in the United States. Next is Israel, which, to be fair, wasn't going to be much better under Kamala.
Yeah.
So, the only thing I can really say is that Trump's rhetoric around building a Trump Gaza is pretty disgusting and dangerous.
It's crazy.
But with Kamala or Trump in office, Palestinian children were going to get bombed. So, I don't know. In regards to the Palestinian conflict, though, I will say that Hamas is a terrorist organization and should be taken seriously. Hamas has received over $1.8 billion from Qatar in funding. Trump's willingness to accept a luxury Boeing 747 from Qatar is a major ethical and national security concern. He plans to use this plane as his personal plane during his presidency and then have it transferred to his yet-built presidential library. The acceptance of this gift will be a clear violation of the Emoluments Clause, which prohibits a president from accepting foreign gifts or titles without congressional approval. It also displays Trump's priorities in terms of foreign policy. He claims to be in strong support of Israel, yet is happy to accept a gift from a nation that actively supports a terrorist organization that is a threat to Israel. Do we really want a president that can be bribed in a monetary fashion? In acceptance of this Qatar gift, he also undermines his own America First standpoint by having an Air Force One plane from a foreign nation rather than America. As far as Kamala Harris is concerned, I doubt she would have accepted such a glamorous gift from a foreign nation. I'm going to skip the section on South Africa. I don't think I need it.
That was stupid.
And unless you really want me
No, I'm just saying that situation was stupid.
Tariffs. I expected you to go into tariffs, but
Fine with going into tariffs.
so I actually don't have a lot written on tariffs.
Oh, that's what you meant.
So, but I'll read what I do have. The tariff situation has been inconsistent, which is bad in its own right. However, that we can understand is that the reciprocal tariffs are still going to go into effect on July 9th. Each country is going to have a placed a minimum tariff of 10% on all goods, while some countries will have additional tariffs based off trade deficits with that country. The chart that President Trump shared on April 2nd had three main columns. One column states that the name of the tariff country. The second column states a percentage tariff imposed on the United States from that country. And the third column shows the reciprocal tariff we are going to impose on that country, which is half of the tariff imposed on us. For example, it states that Vietnam has 90% tariffs on the United States. It does not, because the real number is based on trade deficits. So Vietnam sells to us more than we sell to Vietnam. Vietnam is a significantly poorer country than the United States. I wonder why. So obviously there's a massive trade deficit. The United States is a wealthy country. Of course we're going to buy more than we sell to other countries. In terms of goods, that's in terms of goods. In addition to that, the United States is the largest exporter of services, which includes films, streaming services, and according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, services like these are not counted in a trade deficit because they are not goods. If services were included, some of these trade deficits would actually go down. Switzerland, for example, has a trade deficit of 30% with us. However, if you include services in that calculation, then that rate drops down to 10%. We also happen to have trade surpluses with many other countries, such as the Netherlands and Australia. That's according to WITS. Despite this, these countries are included in the blanket 10% tariffs list. Essentially, what we can gather from this alone is that Trump administration is being deceitful to the general public on what these tariffs are. They're not reciprocal tariffs based off of pre-existing tariffs, but rather tariffs based off trade deficits that really don't point to an issue. Even those trade deficits are misleading because they don't account for services. On top of this, these numbers don't make sense. Why do we need a 10% tariff on Trinidad or Bangladesh? We don't have diplomatic relationships. Let's look at domestic policy. The big, beautiful bill. This bill sucks. It's really bad. It has some decent things in the bill, but ultimately it hurts more middle and working class Americans while significantly benefiting the richest Americans. Let's start with no tax on tips. Sounds great. On the surface, this sounds like a decent provision that would benefit many low-income workers. However, it's important to try to understand the effects of no tax on tips. Provision works as a deductible to your gross income, increasing your total taxable income. This sounds good on paper, but if you dig a little deeper, however, you'll find that this actually helps very few people at all and would likely only expand a deeply harmful, exploitative, and annoying tip culture. According to the Economic Policy Institute, only 5.1% of workers who make less than $25 are tip workers. In addition to that, according to the Brookings Institute, 37% of tip workers don't earn enough money to pay income tax in the first place. According to the Tax Policy Center, only 2% of households would receive a tax cut. Not taxing tips could actually cause low-income workers to lose eligibility on other tax deductions. For instance, if an unmarried worker with one child earns roughly $18,000, they get the full $4,200 earned income tax credit. But if that income is 2/3 tips and $12,000 is no longer taxable, their earned income tax credit would drop by about $2,000. Very low-wage workers would also lose access to the full federal child tax credit. No tax on tips would likely discourage employers from raising employee wages, as they can argue that employees would make more from their paychecks. The minimum pay for a tip worker is as low as $2.13 an hour. It's also possible that more businesses could shift to a tip-based model to pay their employees, displacing the responsibility of paying employees over to you guys. These shifts would be harmful. We already know that current tipping culture. I'm going to skip that. No tax on tips would also reduce federal income by $6.5 billion, that's according to the Tax Policy Center. Likely the ones that would benefit from this position would be tip workers who are already decently well off, those working in higher-end restaurants and such, while the graveyard servers at Denny's would likely not benefit at all and could even lose other essential tax benefits. The bill would also remove a $200 and the point here is that they really ran on that. Like, most of the rhetoric from the Trump administration was on this whole idea of no tax on tips. Because on paper, it sounds great, but if you dig deeper, it's kind of not. And that's why they kind of hide some of their other shadier things. Like a provision that would also remove a $200 tax on gun silencers. Gun safety continues to be one of the most controversial issues in American politics. According to Pew Center research, 47,000 people were killed through gun violence in the United States in 2023. Since January 1st of 2025, there have been 165 mass shootings in the United States. That's as of May, so it's been a little over that. But I didn't bother to go back and check that because 165 is kind of ridiculous. This provision is a very minor one, but it does make gun accessories easier to obtain in the United States. But it shows a lack of priority in the Trump administration to reduce gun violence in the country. Look, I think we should keep our guns, but that doesn't help. We still have kids getting shot up. The bill would also prevent Medicaid funds from going to Planned Parenthood. This is according to PBS. I'm not going to get into abortion later. I thought I was. However, only 4% of health services offered at Planned Parenthood are abortion-related. This is according to KFF Women's Health Policy. According to newly released KFF Health Tracking poll data, 1 in 3 women, 32%, say they have gone to Planned Parenthood clinic for care, as well as 1 in 10 men, which is about 11%. Nearly half of Black women have gone to a Planned Parenthood clinic. Over 4 in 10 individuals with Medicaid say they have received services at Planned Parenthood, and 1/3 of those with private insurance. 1 in 5 Republican women and 4 in 10 Democratic women have received care at a Planned Parenthood clinic. There's no good reason to prevent Medicaid funds from going to Planned Parenthood, as this would impact a large population of sexually active individuals. Not only that, if you want to argue that we shouldn't be funding abortion care, then that argument falls flat. The share of female Medicaid beneficiaries 15 to 49 who receive family planning services at Planned Parenthood clinic and receive the following services. Contraceptive services is 85%, STI services is 57%, gynecological services and pregnancy tests are at 47%. By cutting off Medicaid funding towards Planned Parenthood, you make it more difficult for women to have easy access to health care that often isn't even related to abortion. If we go deeper, we can argue that, for sure, that making it harder to access contraception services such as birth controls and IUDs is bad. You don't want women to have abortions. You want to reduce teen pregnancy, then you have to make contraceptive services easier to access. The Congressional Budget Office estimates an additional $300 in Medicaid spending over the next 10 years through childbirths that would have to be covered by Medicaid due to lack of contraceptive care. So blocking funding wouldn't even save money and would only remove essential sexual health care access to millions of Americans. How does that help Americans? The bill would also expand the SALT deductions. I'm going to skip the SALT deductions. The actual tax rate that Americans would pay would also change. The bill makes permanent the 2017 Jobs Act by Trump, which was his last budget bill. And so those tax rates, the Congressional Budget Office reveals that the lowest 10% of earners would lose 2% of their income by 2027, and an additional 4% by 2029. Meanwhile, the highest 10% of owners would see a 4% increase in their income by 2027 and an additional 3% by 2029. The other 80% in the middle would see their income increase about 29%. This does not, $2,900. This does not justify the decreased income for those in poverty. Even then, the cuts to Medicaid and the significant increase in the deficit will continue to harm Americans. Let's talk about those cuts to Medicaid. The bill would also cut Medicaid roughly $900 billion to $1 trillion over the next decade. This is from the Congressional Budget Office. So this is like, they're running all the numbers for the congressmen who are reading this. This is in there. Everyone who voted on that bill knew that. This bill would also install new work requirements, co-pays, and would force Americans to reapply every 6 months. This is red tape. It's bureaucracy. You think every single person on Medicaid is going to find the time to reapply every 6 months? And what if they make an administrative error? Then what? There's a term called churn, which is this idea that there are thousands of people who die every year because they lost access to Medicaid for a short amount of time. It could be as low as a week. And this just makes that worse. COVID-19. The Trump administration's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic was weak and ineffective. It led to the unnecessary deaths of thousands, and the impacts are still felt well within our nation today. Everything from major industries suffering a skills gap to hyperinflation, shortened hours, and the further division of Americans continues to burden us today, even if you don't immediately notice. According to Johns Hopkins, a pandemic was viewed as a high probability and even overdue event within the expert community. This is due to patterns from recent outbreaks, some of which you saw on the news. You saw the news for, the avian flu and Ebola and Zika virus when those were going out. Even Trump's own experts, who predicted, based on a 2019 influenza simulation, that the United States would be underprepared, underfunded, and would be unable to respond effectively to the pandemic. Those experts being the Health and Human Services Department under Trump's first term. When you have hundreds of different agencies across state and federal governments, horizontally and vertically, it can become very difficult to communicate and effectively tackle an emergency of this scale. Fortunately for Trump, the Bush and Obama administrations had realized that the likelihood of a pandemic was high and developed a pandemic response plan in place, that being the national security playbook for early response to high consequence emerging infectious disease threats and biological threats. This is from the Executive Office of the President. In 2018, Trump gutted those plans and replaced them with the 2018 Pandemic Crisis Action Plan. But Trump's own Department of Health and Human Services, under that Crimson Contagion influenza simulation, revealed that Trump's arrangements would be woefully unprepared for the challenge. Trump's rhetoric failed to mobilize his administration and the public to take action in countering the COVID-19 virus. President Trump, in March 2020, claimed that nobody knew there'd be a pandemic or epidemic of this proportion. Nobody's ever seen like this. Forget that 100 years ago we had the Spanish flu epidemic in the United States, and also, the hundreds of experts that were telling Trump, hey, we're gonna have a pandemic eventually. Do you have a plan? Which he made one, I guess. Throughout February, Trump would present to reporters that we have this very much under control. Very interestingly, we've had no deaths at all. That's according to the White House press briefings. They keep all the records. Trump's first few real actions towards pandemic prevention would include implementing travel restrictions on passengers from China. Trump would also refer to the pandemic as a China virus or other similar names pointing out its Asian origin. This rhetoric likely influenced an increase in Asian American hate crimes and discrimination. A study by Pew Research found that 1/3 or 32% of adult Asian Americans knew someone who had experienced some sort of hate speech or violence. And you can say that's anecdotal, so let's look at this study. Another study by the National Library of Medicine and the CDC found a 135% spike in Asian American hate crimes from 2019 to 2020. I don't think I need to explain why that is a bad thing. I do have to point out how Trump's China virus rhetoric likely influenced that dissent. Aside from this first action fueling a xenophobic firestorm, it also failed at really accomplishing much. It tightened restrictions on the origin of the virus being China, but it failed to account for the virus entering the country from literally anywhere else. It's already spread to other countries. Why are we only blocking China? It took 6 weeks for Trump to employ travel restrictions to Europe, but by then the damage had already been done. Trump's campaign of 15 days to slow the spread, which grew to 30, also failed to accomplish much. I mean, we all saw it. We all lived through that. It's important to note how Trump's rhetoric failed to mobilize citizens in getting vaccinated or wearing masks. These are some examples of Trump's rhetoric. As in April, cases were surging, and he publicly stated, it's going to go away, and in May, he claimed that with or without a vaccine, it's going to pass, and we're going to be back to normal. Did it go back to normal? Trump also claimed, I think that this goes away in 2 months with the heat. This was in February. This is the leader of your country. The idea that this pandemic was going to be a piece of cake to get through and that it would simply go away as poised by Trump persuaded largely conservative members of the country to not take the pandemic seriously, thus delaying real efforts to slow the pandemic. Trump's failure to properly address the pandemic shattered our economy. It's hard to say in the end how bad the damage really is, as we're still recovering from the pandemic. According to the National Bureau of Labor and Statistics, the shocks to food and energy prices contributed substantially to the rise in inflation during the COVID-19 period, which was going to happen despite who was in office, but Trump delayed any efforts to prevent that. The pandemic was going to hurt us regardless, but Trump's delay made it worse. That's just economic stuff. The total death toll from COVID, which is still growing today, has reached 1,104,000. In the year 2020, 6,000 people died from the influenza virus. They're not comparable. That's according to U.S. Health and Statistics data trends. Trump's inability to grapple with such a crisis presents a clear inability in the president's ability to address crises in an effective manner, such as proves that measles is an entirely preventable disease that is slowly creeping its way through the United States. As of July 2nd, there have been 1,267 cases of measles in the U.S., according to the CDC. However, Trump's current Health and Human Services Secretary, RFK, has failed to address that. Let's look at fascism. How we define fascism depends highly. Due to this, most of my focus will be on historical precedent set by the two most indisputable fascist governments, Italy and Germany. It's important to remember that fascism doesn't happen in a day, and the government system we are currently under is not directly fascistic. What I'm trying to prove in this section is that Trump heavily mirrors tactics and ideologies used by other fascist governments and leaders. This is what makes Trump a fascist. Fascism is also going to take a different shape depending on the time and the culture. Like Coda said, Mexican fascism and European fascism are going to look differently. This is in 1930s Germany or Italy. This is 2025 in America. We have technologies that we can produce forms of propaganda inconceivable to Hitler or Mussolini. We also have, 200 years precedent of a strong democracy. To expect modern-day fascism to directly mirror either Germany or Italy's fascism is a fatal flaw in any intellectual discussion on the matter. I am also not stating that Trump is exactly Hitler or Mussolini in the same way that Hitler is not Mussolini and Genghis Khan isn't Mao and Stalin isn't Putin. Tyrants, dictators, and warmongers are always unique. It's that uniqueness that gets them into those positions of powers because, they aren't Hitler. Calling Trump Hitler is a disservice to any nuance in the conversation and sets the idea that if Trump really isn't Hitler, then it must be all right, I guess. He's not Hitler, at least. With that preamble out of the way, let's define fascism. One of the major characteristics of fascism is ultranationalism. Nationalism can be defined as an ideology based on the premise that the individual's loyalty and devotion to the nation-state surpass any other individual's or group interest. That's according to Britannica. The significance here is that of putting the idea of the nation above individual interest, usually without adherence to logic. You can see this idea in Italian fascism pretty well. Gustave Le Bon was a sociologist and anthropologist in the late 1800s and early 1900 books. He wrote a book called The Crowd, which was of heavy influence towards Mussolini. Le Bon believed that to sway a crowd, it didn't require telling the crowd the truth. What it required was telling the crowd what they wanted to hear. Does that sound familiar? George Sorel was a French historian who also believed that in order to unify a group of people, you needed to what were called mobilizing myths. These are stories that enclose with them all the strongest inclinations of a people. That's from Sorel's book, page 125. These ideas are adapted by Italian fascists. These are the following quotes from Mussolini's speech in Naples. Our myth is a nation. Our myth is a greatness of the nation. This greatness, which we want to translate into a total reality, we subordinate everything else. For us, a nation is not just territory, but something spiritual. A nation is great when it translates into reality the force of its spirits. Nationalism often pits its citizens against each other. It creates an othering of groups that don't follow that nationalistic rhetoric, or groups that can be used as a scapegoat for the problems of the nation. Fascism tends to rise out of a deep national unrest. It's this unrest that works to mobilize its citizen to believe that it's in something that is greater than themselves. To point out, no one has trusted this government since Nixon. No one liked Nixon, no one liked Reagan, no one liked Clinton, no one liked Bush or Obama or Biden, and all for good reason too. No one trusts their government anymore. It's that kind of idea and weakness in the nation that populists like Trump take advantage of. Germany was facing that arrest post-World War I with massive economic hardship due in part to the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler used a sense of nationalism to direct the citizens into fascism. What will raise the German people up again is confidence in the possibility of regaining its freedom. And this conviction can only be the final product of the same feeling in millions of individuals. That's from Mein Kampf, page 412. Hitler also stated this in Mein Kampf: the psyche of the great masses is not receptive to anything that is half-hearted and weak. So, don't half-ass things. Mean what you say. Don't fall back. Don't apologize for anything. Does that sound familiar? Who were Hitler's targets in the social otherings? You know who. It was the communists, it was the Jews, it was the gypsies. It defied logic, it was irrational. That's what fascism and nationalism does. It defies any logical reason to other populations and rally the citizens around the nation. So how does this play out in Trump's America? Immigration and DEI policy, as well as a very blatant attack towards transgender individuals. Both rhetorically and in practice, Trump continues to other these groups without logical backing to mobilize the citizens in support of the nation. First, Trump is nationalistic. His literal slogan is "Make America Great Again." It's appealing to that myth of, hey, we're kind of been fucking up, so let's fix that. Fix that. Is that not the myth of the nation? In this rhetoric, he refers to anyone who runs against him as vermin. He also constantly refers to the left as radical left lunatics. This matters because there's millions of Americans who follow that rhetoric. It only serves to divide the nation and is a completely unnuanced and dishonest portrayal of the left. It dehumanizes his political opponents. This is othering, and it is what appeals to the crowd's emotions that LeBon talked about. In addition to this, Trump's pardoning of the January 6th insurrectionists sent a clear message that those who commit violent and uncivil acts in the name of the nation are favorable in the country in the right. This is also anti-democratic, but I can get that into later. Trump has built his national identity around those who serve the idea of make America great again, appealing to traditional values and ignoring any voices that don't fit that mold. The mold being the traditional white religious household. Let's look at the way Trump administration is harming and othering the LGBT community, specifically trans people. Donald Trump's rhetoric surrounding transgender Americans specifically is another instance of othering. It creates social divides in our society. The first example being his executive order titled Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. Breaking this down, we see how rhetoric is used to obscure truth. Restoring biological truth is inaccurate. There is so much research that backs up that transgenderism has its basis within biology. You know this. Secondly, by phrasing it as defending women, it makes it seem as though this is an altruistic act by the Trump administration to defend women. Trump is a sex offender, mind you. And his anti-abortion rhetoric is explicitly anti-women. He does not care about women. However, there is also no basis to suggest that trans ideology harms women. This is false and is simply meant to villainize people. You know, what people will be like, well, if people can dress up and, be whatever, claim they're a woman, they can go into the women's bathroom and, assault women. Those are cis men doing it, not trans people. So the problem is men. Through this executive order, Trump has attempted to remove any protections for trans people in both the social sphere and even the workplace, with attempts to roll back discrimination protections from trans individuals. In an earlier draft of the Big Beautiful Bill, there was a clause that would ban Medicaid from funding any gender-affirming care. While this didn't pass, it is more anti-trans rhetoric that seeks to hurt trans individuals regardless of citizenship status. Why? Well, by stifling any movement to expand trans and right safety, it appeals to the traditional state of the nation. Man, woman, 6 kids, white picket fence. Nazis also targeted trans individuals, by the way. More violence towards women is not from trans people, it's from cis men. But this rhetoric scapegoats the issue towards trans people, with no basis in reality or logic, which is fascistic. Other things that point towards the rhetoric is removal of the T from LGBT on government websites such as the National Park Service. This is not only trans erasure, it's historical revisionism. Trans people were a significant portion of the protesting population during the Stonewall riots. This is fascistic. Violence towards trans individuals has doubled during Trump's administration. In 2021, 51 transgender individuals were killed compared to 29 in 2017. This is from Congress.gov. Pete Hegseth has also attempted to rename the Harvey Milk TAO 206 ship. Harvey Milk was an openly gay politician. What does that accomplish? Trump continues to divide using the alienation of trans individuals. This feeds into the social war and breeds fascism. Trump's immigration policy is another blatant attempt at scapegoating despite there being no logical evidence to support either his ideology or his policy. First off, the term illegal is misleading. It gives a sense of a major crime being committed. Trump is a 34-time committed felon. However, being undocumented only falls as a civil offense, same as a traffic ticket. A large number of illegal immigrants don't even enter illegally, but overstay visas. Roughly 45% of the ACLU However, Trump's rhetoric sweeps anyone who came into the country as a criminal. It's dehumanizing and it's intentional. Some examples are the mischaracterizations of Haitians eating pets, constantly bringing up that they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're bringing rapists, and some, I assume, are good people, but I speak to border guards and they're telling us what we're getting. Another blatant example is, I think the real number is 15, 16 million into our country. When they do that, we got a lot of work to do. They're poisoning the blood of our country. This was said on December 16, 2023, according to Politico. This is literally a direct appeal to the nationalistic idea. It's the exact type of rhetoric Hitler used about the Jewish population. How can you defend that? Other rhetoric that's common is that immigrants are stealing jobs or leeching off of welfare or raping our women. The purpose is to alienate and sow fear and mistrust of immigrants. Not just immigrants, but brown people in general. It's not like you know someone's status just by looking at them, but you can make a pretty good guess if you're brown, right? It frames immigrants as a problem in the country that needs to be fixed. However, there is no real logical basis to support these claims. For one, the National Institute of Justice found that illegal immigrants might commit a violent crime 400 per 100,000 persons. Meanwhile, citizens will commit a crime every 1,000 per 100,000 persons. Clearly, the illegal immigrants aren't the ones committing the majority of crimes. In addition to this, the U.S. Customs and Border Protections found that in 2024, 17,048 criminal alien arrests were made, which seems like a high number. However, 10,935 of those arrests, the crime was illegal re-entry and a non-violent crime. Only 221 of those arrests out of 17,000 were sexual offenses. 29 were homicide. So even the data shows that most crime committed by undocumented immigrants is nonviolent. So why are we so focused on undocumented immigrants? So much so that ICE is the most heavily funded police force in American history, with the big beautiful bill allocating $170 billion towards ICE. Meanwhile, the bill also caps immigration judges to 800, causing even more backlog and, trying to come in the right way. That's according to the American Immigration Council. Undocumented immigrants also paid $96.7 billion into federal, state, and local taxes. So how are they leeching off the welfare system if they're paying taxes? They have a tax ID number even if they don't have a social security number. And if they've ever bought anything at the store, that's sales tax. So removing immigrants doesn't really do anything to help Americans stay because undocumented immigrants aren't the problem. What warrants this level of destruction to a people? Let's see some of the human rights issues brought by this immigration policy. Firstly, we're hearing reports of U.S. citizens being detained by ICE. As was the case in Southern California, one man who was asked not to be identified claimed the following: "He slammed me to a gate. He put my hands behind my back. I'm an American citizen. You do not do that to Americans. This is cruel treatment to American citizens from the Trump administration." According to Reuters, Kristi Noem, the head of Homeland Security, who can't even define habeas corpus, attempted to deport peoples to Libya, a country that is currently going through a civil war. We're not allowed, if Ian wanted to, get a plane, go to Libya freely, he can't. He's not allowed because, they're going through a civil war. 7 people have also died in ICE detention centers this year alone. A report from the ACLU stating that 95% of deaths, this is from, So in 2007, from 2017 to 21, there were 59 people who have died in ICE detention centers. This compares to Biden's presidency of 29. Both are bad. However, a report from the ACLU stating that 95% of the deaths could have been avoided. A new report released today by the American Civil Liberties Union, American Oversight, and Physicians for Human Rights exposed the Department of Homeland Security's flawed internal oversight mechanisms and failure to provide adequate medical and mental health care, resulting in preventable deaths of immigrants in immigration and customs enforcement facilities. A wired investigation into 911 calls from 10 of the nation's largest immigration detention centers found that serious medical incidents are rising at many of the sites. Data obtained through public record requests show that at least 60% of the centers analyzed had reported serious pregnancy complications, suicide attempts, or sexual assault allegations. Since January, these 10 facilities have collectively placed nearly 400 emergency calls. Nearly 50 of those have involved potential cardiac episodes, 26 reference seizures, and 17 reported head injuries. 7 calls described suicide attempts or self-harm, including overdoses and hangings. 6 others involved allegations of sexual abuse, including at least one case logged as staff on detainee.
And I ask you again, for what? New data from ICE shows that 65% of people detained by ICE don't have any criminal convictions, and that 93% had no violent convictions. So who are we arresting? Normal people who, trying to live their lives, who are paying into, our tax system, boosting the economy, stimulating by purchasing, working jobs. Alligator Alcatraz is another cool example of mistreatment of people who don't deserve it. Trump has already played with the idea of sending immigrants, most again who don't have criminal records, to Guantanamo, and even reopening Alcatraz. So when those plans fizzled out, it's no surprise he wanted to build his own, hence Alligator Alcatraz. Located deep within the Florida marshes, it ensures that escape is nearly impossible due to the thousands of alligators who call those marshes home. This is a concentration camp. It's cruel. Trump claimed that this would house some of the most vicious people on the planet. However, in a 37-page state document named Immigration Enforcement Operation Plans, a subsection titled Time Limits and Restrictions said, an unoccupied minor under the 18 or anyone over the 70, females with children, and family groups would not be placed in board rooms, unaccompanied. The document, in another instance, said that juveniles, babies, pregnant women, and others whom it is medically necessary shall have regular snacks, milk, juice, etc. So that entails that they're going to be in there with all the vicious criminals. They're bringing children and pregnant women into this building. Already, the facility has seen flooding, as is common in marshy regions. Why do you think they don't build stuff there? Especially during hurricane season. It's humid and full of mosquitoes. This is cruel, no way around it. Kilmar Abrego Garcia was deported earlier this year to a prison in El Salvador. He was deported without due process, and the Supreme Court demanded his return to the United States. However, Trump did everything in his power to A, justify not returning him, and B, delaying his return, a clear attempt to undermine the courts, which is a fascist tactic that undermines democracy. Eventually, Trump did return Garcia. However, we know that Garcia endured torture at that Salvadorian prison. Garcia said he suffered severe beatings, severe sleep deprivation, and psychological torture in the notorious El Salvador prison the Trump administration had deported him to in March. According to the court documents filed Wednesday, Garcia lost 30 pounds in his first 2 weeks there. A document describes some of the abuse experienced by Garcia. The document describes how Garcia was stripped upon arrival at Seaside and kicked in the legs with boots and struck on his head and arms to make him change clothes faster. By the next day, he had visible bruises and lumps all over his body. The detainees were held in overcrowded cells with metal bunks that did not have mattresses, and Abrego Garcia and 20 Salvadorian inmates were forced to kneel from approximately 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., with guards striking anyone who fell from exhaustion. According to the court filings, Abrego Garcia was denied bathroom breaks, and as a result, he soiled himself. Andrew Hernandez Ramirez is another individual who was deported without due process to the mega prison. He was an asylum seeker who was denied asylum, so there was some due process in saying, you can't be here, but they told him that he would go back to Venezuela. Where did he end up? That same prison where Garcia ended up. He's still there. No real criminal convictions. I mean, he was gay, but I don't think that's a crime. Likely, he is experiencing the same abuse. There are many other instances of abuse by the federal government, either ICE or Homeland Security. However, I'm running out of time. Trump's rhetoric hurts not just undocumented immigrants, but Hispanic citizens as well. As stated in a news article by NBC, man obsessed with cable news shot 2 Latino men he thought were illegal immigrants. Said he was pissed about undocumented migrants receiving welfare. FBI data shows that 42.7% increase in Latino hate crimes from 2020 to 2024, likely a result of the anti-undocumented rhetoric. This is all fascistic. It's an othering without a logical basis. We even see right-wing figures like Laura Loomer talking about feeding all 65 million Latino Americans to alligators. How can you defend that? Laura Loomer met with J.D. Vance a month ago, so, they're in cahoots. Political violence and its undermining of democracy. No King's Day saw the murder of Melissa Portman, a Democratic representative of Minnesota. She was killed by Vance Bolter, who shot another congressman and had a list of other targets, including Tim Walz. This is a significant example of rising political violence in this country perpetuated by the right. Mike Lee of Utah, after this murder, tweeted, "This is what happens when Marxists don't get their way," with a picture of Bolter, implying that Bolter was a Marxist. Bolter was a Trump supporter and very anti-abortion. So this is a state senator using the murder of a congressman to propagandize his political agenda. Bolter isn't even a Marxist, he's a Trump supporter and staunch pro-lifer. Trump didn't reach out to Walz, instead calling him grossly incompetent, instead of, addressing domestic terrorism in the country, showing any form of leadership. Maybe it's because this benefits the Trump administration. Violence is the point, and it benefits fascism. We're seeing it. According to Miller, the Brennan Center conducted a nationwide survey of election officials early in 2023, showing that 1/3 of all surveyed has personally been abused, harassed, or threatened because of their job, and 3/4 of all survey respondents felt that threats had increased in recent years. I wonder if Trump's rhetoric of, "I didn't lose the 2020 election," had anything to do with his sudden uptick in violence towards election officials. Nevada, Arizona, Utah, and Texas have had the highest amount of violence towards election officials. These states are also the ones who strongly opposed the election results in 2020, perpetuated again by the Trump administration. According to Vox, Capitol Police recorded 900 threats against members of Congress prior to the 2016 election. The number continued to increase in every year of Trump's presidency, peaking at 9,700 in 2022. FEC filings found the candidates' budget of personal security of House and Senate increased by 500%. In 2020, when Wisconsin Supreme Court upheld Biden's victory in the state, their Supreme Court was met with a large barrage of threats. In 2020, U.S. District Judges Esther Salas' son, Daniel Anderl, was fatally shot in their family home in New Jersey in 2020 by a lawyer posing as a delivery person. Pizza deliveries have been placed in the name of Daniel Anderl and have been placed and sent to homes of judges and their families who preside over the various lawsuits challenging the Trump administration's policy. That's a form of violence and intimidation. The Anti-Defamation League found that in 2024, for the third year in a row, all extremist-related killings in the U.S. were tied to right-wing extremism. All. Donald Trump is related to this. Donald Trump has done nothing to dissuade such violence. Instead, he pardoned the violent January 6th insurrectionists. That legitimizes political violence. Many Republicans are also faced violence from the far-right extremism. When Republican election official Gabriel Sterling criticized Trump's claims of winning the 2020 election, he faced numerous amounts of harassment and threats. Rusty Bowers, Republican Speaker of the House of Arizona, testified against Trump before the House committee investigating that January 6th attack. In 2023, he was swatted. Someone called the cops claiming he had a murdered woman and a pipe bomb in his house. Does Trump address these things? Does he talk about it? No, he'll send the military to LA to quell riots, but not, against politicians that are working against him. It's convenient. That is fascism. The political othering and just kind of letting all this violence pass. It's kind of it.
Need time before rebuttal?
Yeah, do you want prep?
What kind of prep?
I don't know.
Time.
We can just go into it.
No, I'm fine with going into it. Because a long speech, to be able to counteract all that, I would have to write a whole other speech.
Yeah, well, we can always.
So I'm just wondering, what is your bigger stuff that you would like to get into?
That's up to you. I think I covered my bases pretty well.
Okay.
I guess the biggest thing, we talked, I'll split it up by, if you'd like, I can always resume.
Right,
you can ask me to be like, can you bring up what you said here? I'm not just going to be like, all right, good luck, no notes. But the three major points were foreign policy, specifically focusing on Greenland and the Mineral Security Partnership. Qatar, I didn't talk about South Africa, kind of Israel. So that was really it as far as foreign policy. As far as domestic policy, I really only focused on Trump's COVID-19 pandemic and the Big Beautiful Bill and fascism
trans individuals and illegal immigrants.
Is there one you feel particularly strongly for?
All of them.
All right. Foreign policy. Let's do that one.
Yeah.
So I think his foreign policy has actually been pretty decent, even though you think that a lot of his stuff that he said has muddled the waters kind of and resulted in bad outcomes. I would disagree, because the Greenland thing and the Canada thing, while being... What'd you say was the bad outcome again?
Undermining our allies in an essential crisis regarding mineral production.
Okay, so the Greenland thing, there hasn't been much talk about it for a long time, right?
That's true.
It's looking like nothing's really going to happen with that, and a lot of people of Greenland would be in support of it anyways. Along with that, Canada, having access to Canada and its resources would be really, really useful in, boosting GDP, boosting things like this.
Right.
And specifically, one of the sectors of Canada, I forgot which one, was actually looking like it was a little more willing to do something in cooperation with the United States. And I don't think expanding the United States would be a bad thing. In fact, a lot of people in these places are saying that they want the benefits of the United States. They want how the United States runs in their, area of living. So that would just be my kind of thing with it. Along with that, the Middle East is a very big thing, highly contested among a lot of people. There's Israel, Palestine, Israel, Iran. And honestly, the Israel-Palestine thing was really dumb. And I think both sides really sucked in that, because both Trump and the Joe Biden presidency kind of handled part of it.
Our entire government is in support of Israel.
Yeah.
So there's no real winning.
It's a little
there.
weird. I would say Israel is the least evil out of the Middle East, but overall, it's still really odd. Unless you want to contend Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's, it's hard. But regardless of that, I would say that what he's done with Israel is a little weird, but I will say that his Middle East tour, where he made a lot of relations with a lot of Middle East countries, was very beneficial. He realizes that a lot of these countries coming up and becoming more developed and industrialized, they're going to start being more... They're going to start being bigger consumers on the world market.
Right.
And he wants to take control of that, like a business, essentially.
I want to contest that.
Okay. What do you want to say?
So we made a lot of deals with Saudi Arabia,
Yes.
who are bombing children in Yemen,
Okay.
because they're at a war with Yemen. So you can't say anti-war there. Secondly, I would argue that the best possible form of foreign policy with the Middle East is to just get out of there.
Completely get out of it.
Yeah, completely get out of there. I mean, the reason being in the Middle East is pretty unpopular. The Iraq war was incredibly unpopular. Current Israel-Palestine conflict is really unpopular. When we were about to go into war with Iran, that was completely unpopular. But what is our goal there? Just money?
No, not mining.
Money.
Commerce. Oh. Yeah. Money. No, I think, a lot of it is... I don't think everything he's done, he should have done. A lot of the Israel stuff was a little bit of overreach. I don't think he should have done that. But I do understand why he's making relations with people in the Middle East, is my contention. They're the closest to becoming industrialized and becoming, competitors in the world market.
Can I give you a quick little mini history lesson? I'll just make it super...
I'm part of the Middle East, or what?
Yeah.
Okay.
And our influence there. So where did our, kind of relationship with the Middle East start? Really started with, the Persian Gulf War, right? Iraq is like, hey, Kuwait's over there. Let's just take them out, be part of Iraq. But a little bit prior to that, the United States worked with Saudi Arabia to start building, oil refineries and stuff. Oil. We wanted the oil. We realized oil is pretty cool. We like that. So we contracted this really rich guy who worked in this, construction business that helped, influence American power in Saudi Arabia and therefore the Middle East. That guy was Mohammed bin Laden. And Osama bin Laden really hated that. And so when he fled to Afghanistan and then, Persian Gulf War comes around, he's like, hey, Al-Qaeda and we just took out Russia. We'll come, help take out Iraq too while we're at it. And then Saudi Arabia's like, no, we don't want that. We want America to do it. Fueling more hatred
from Osama and big portions of the Middle East against America. And then we've got 9/11. And then, then that brought us into Iraq, unnecessarily killing thousands of Americans. And we're just, why are we there? For money?
I think the overreach there is bad, but what are you saying? You don't think we should try to commerce with a foreign country?
Best attempts to commerce with the Middle East brought us the Iraq War, and it brought us 9/11, and it means all of us were paying taxes or complicit in the genocide.
Those were foreign relations, not foreign commerce, though.
Yeah, but it was fueled from foreign commerce. Because
you're saying because the motivation was oil?
Yeah.
I mean, that's fair.
That was the motivation.
But that's no longer the motivation. It's more the people.
I thought you said that was the motivation, because you said that the tour was beneficial because we made important allyships with these developing nations who are more industrialized.
It's not about oil. It's about commerce, trading.
But
not just oil.
Oil is part of commerce.
Yeah, but we have a lot of our oil industry is set up very differently than how it was when we went into Iraq.
Right.
We are not as heavily reliant on the Middle East. My point is that we aren't there just for oil. We're there for the people as well, trading, money in general, trading for this, trading for that, and people buying from us as well when we're trying to develop a country. It's not so heavily focused on one spot to where it'll make us, go in there, do what we did last time, and then have people hate us. In fact, a lot of people in the Middle East are in support of the U.S. and what it's done right now, which it's a little, double-edged, because I don't think we should have gone that far. But I think trading with foreign nations, even though no matter what they do, I mean, we've traded with Russia, we've traded with almost every country on the planet. I don't think that's a bad thing. You can trade with someone if they're immoral,
Right.
I would say that it'd be fine to trade with them. I just don't think he should have done it to the extent that he did.
But he did, though. So...
Right, that's fair. Yeah, he did. I'm not in support of that as far as it goes. But I'm saying foreign relations overall, I think it was more beneficial than it was hindered. It's not sparked any lashback because of how big the U.S. is from the Middle East so far. If you count the U.S. bases, you can count that. But I wouldn't really. Nothing bad happened there. They notified us. It was a little tit for tat. And it ended up fine. A lot of the things that he tried to implement there have been good. Like you said, he's been trying to make peace. He's talked to both the countries. It's been lukewarm results, but
whose fault that is.
At least he is trying, which a lot of presidents previously have done, including Democratic Party presidents, including the previous presidency was war-stricken and made very, very light mitigation tactics.
I'll give Trump this, now that you mentioned that. Trump did more than Bush, and Trump did more than Obama. However, Biden also pulled out of Afghanistan, and that was a whole mess and a whole ordeal.
Mm-hmm.
But he kind of kept us out of the Middle East for a bit until, our overlords in Israel forced us back in there. So even then, I still feel like Biden and therefore Kamala's administration did more to get out of the Middle East, which I think we need to be out of, militarily especially.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I'll say that wartime-wise, it is better to pull out of it. But like I said before, I think it has helped us more so than it's hindered us. I think when they develop, because of these deals that we have, we're going to be trading through Saudi Arabia a lot, which is going to spread to most of the Middle East because Saudi Arabia is the most developed out of them. Things like this. I really think that it was a overall 60%, 70% good thing. Foreign policy.
I think there's a lot of dead people who would beg to differ.
There's war. There's always going to be war in the Middle East, especially. There's high contention.
Because of United States intervention in the Middle East.
Not just because of the United States. They were going to war anyways. They're going to have a lot of.
Why should we be complicit in that? Why should our tax dollars as Americans go towards that?
I never said they should.
So how is that a good thing? I mean, that's still dead people who contest the idea that it was
I'm saying that even though, we helped in it, but we were not responsible for it. I'm not supporting what he did there with the outreach to the amount that he did do. But I'm saying that just because there was war and we contributed a little bit to that war doesn't mean that the deals and things that the benefits that we're gonna get out of it are gonna be lessened or succumbed to those things. I mean, this is just how government works.
Right.
Throughout history, it's not what I prefer, obviously, but it's kind of what you have to deal with. You have to choose lesser of evils, or you have to choose, more beneficial, etc.
I think on the Middle East we are closer, so I think we can move on.
Okay, that's right.
Not to just be like,
No, that's
I
fine.
don't know what to say.
No, you're good.
I just am realizing I wrote like a page, like
Yeah,
a
that's
little
fair.
bit on Israel.
I mean, I didn't write.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said your piece about Greenland and Canada.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the big beautiful bill,
Okay.
which is the most recent thing that's actually
that's
affecting
good with me.
most Americans.
I think it's got bad things, it's got good things. I think more good things than bad things, because the main agenda of this bill is the money being sent to, a lot of people call it a spending bill, which is majority true, being sent to these things. What am I thinking of? I'm trying to think of it. Anyways, these things being set up to help with ICE and deportations, things like this, etc. And that's what he ran on. I'm in support of deporting people who are not here legally. I'm not saying that because I think they're going to commit a hate crime. I'm saying that because they crossed the border without the legal actions that they needed to take to come across legally.
I think we're going to circle back to the big beautiful bill.
No, that's fine. I wasn't trying to get off track. I'm just saying.
Oh, no.
Overall.
There's no pulling out now. We're going into the immigration debate.
Oh, that's what you mean.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. That's okay. Why do you think we should not deport immigrants?
It's a civil offense. It's not that big of a deal.
Okay. So you don't think the amount that it is affecting us should be considered, is considerable towards the amount that we are putting into it?
How is it affecting us?
It's affecting us in many ways. First off, small businesses running off of paying people less than people here are willing to, which is like really ethically weird. Trying to get dark-skinned people to work for less for them just because they are dark-skinned and come from a different place is a little odd to me personally. And that's mainly where they work. At these usually blue-collar businesses that kind of take advantage of them. I think that's really bad.
So, can I?
Yeah, you can talk on that.
In regards to that, A, why isn't the responsibility on the business owners and the corporations? And B, wouldn't mass amnesty solve that problem?
So you're saying we should hold the business owners more accountable for that?
Yeah, they're the ones paying their employees.
So if we crack down on small business owners, making it harder for them to run their business, to try and stop them from hiring immigrants, what happens when no immigrants
What's
can find a
this
job?
focus on
That means,
small business owners? Because it's also massive corporations.
yeah, but not as much because they're more under
Based
more
off
legal
of what?
litigation. They're
More legal
looked
litigation,
at. Yeah,
right.
they're more looked at on the market, and if the bigger you get, obviously the more people are going to look at you, and so they better have a lot more of their stuff. I know this because my dad works in the excavation industry, and the amount of people that were there illegally drastically changed from when he went to a small business that he ran with a couple of people that he knew to a big business. It's something that happens very fundamentally, like Walmart compared to Terrell's. You're going to have a lot of difference there with how the papers are in order, how they run things like this, etc.
Right.
Walmart is very, very strict about certain parameters and rules, where if you worked at Terrell's, it'd probably be a lot less strict.
That's a
And
good
that is
point.
for many reasons.
Okay, so still, why shouldn't we hold business owner accountable? Even if they're small, they're still, committing unethical acts by underpaying the most vulnerable citizens of our society. Or maybe I won't use citizens, I'll use peoples.
Right. We can, but I think this is a better method of doing it. Try to save our businesses and hinder more so the people that came here without doing it legally anyways. They're already breaking the rules. And it's not like we're, committing, horrible acts on them. It's like we're okay, the It's not like we're torturing him.
We are, dude.
No.
Come on, Abrego
whoa,
Garcia.
whoa,
Sorry.
whoa,
Sorry.
Sorry.
No,
I'm sorry. I just
Gilmar Abrego Garcia wasn't tortured by us. He was tortured by the prison. Along with that, we should not have sent him there. I think that was a complete mishap and overlook of how that was ran. But also, when you look at it, you have to understand that when you're the president of the United States, something as big as we are, with how much power we have, you cannot be the supervisor of every single little thing that goes on. I understand he handled it very terribly, but when you bring up all these examples of different little things that happened here and there, he is not the supervisor of every single part of his administration.
You are very correct there. That's Kristi Noem. She couldn't, define habeas corpus. She said it's all right to deport anyone or remove them from the country, which it's not. And so she's clearly not qualified to oversee these administrative errors. And you're right, it was an administrative error under the Homeland Security, under Kristi Noem.
Okay.
So, you're right there. Of course it's not Trump's fault, but also then why did Trump defend it?
I think it was more so of a, what am I looking for? Of a social act rather than how he actually felt about the situation. It was more so just to keep bad judgment from his administration. I'm sure that he was not happy with that personally.
So it's appealing to the crowd through emotion rather than truth, like Laban said in
Or
fascism.
like every single
Yeah.
other candidate in politics ever in the history of the world. I mean, it happens all the time. Honestly, I don't think you can name a single thing that another government has not done that makes Trump fascistic. Honestly, like every other country in the world, almost every other country in the world, deports people. Obviously, with a country as big as the U.S., we're going to have more mishaps with deportation than all the other countries in the world, but that are smaller. But regardless, he's doing a lot of the similar things that other smaller countries in the world are doing. And a lot of these, make America great again. Almost every single candidate in politics runs off of change, runs off of making things better. That is the point of government in the modern day. It's making something different that people, because otherwise we'd just be in a monarchy.
Kind of trailing off.
Okay,
the
that's fair.
original.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
So
Well, we'll get to that.
No,
We'll
we're
get
good.
to
We're good.
Don't worry. Okay, so first of all, we are abusing people, all right,
Okay.
in this very country.
Mhm.
We can disregard El Salvador, but we're also sending them to El Salvador on American planes. So, A, that. B, why wouldn't mass amnesty work? It's less cruel than separating families.
Define mass amnesty.
It's Reagan did this.
Mhm.
I fucking hate Reagan. But Reagan was like, hey, we've got all these, illegal immigrants. Here's your citizenship. No problems there.
How would there be no problems there?
I mean, maybe one guy kills someone.
Well,
but-
I mean, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we cannot just allow this to happen. This is setting a precedent for other people thinking they can just come here. That's not what we are for. We are a sovereign nation, and we are not, to pander and to all these other countries of people coming over. If we give them just legal citizenship, it's going to happen more. Because we're going to think, we can just make our country as big as possible, jam us together as much as possible, let as many people take advantage of our government,
Our border policies.
well, not only our border policies, but
Immigration policy.
our government,
Institutions?
institutions and benefits and things like that. I think that them just being able to, obviously, I don't think currently with the amount we have, it was a lot, by the way, it was a lot of people that came in. I still don't think that would affect us negatively, majorly, if we made them illegal now, but it's the precedent that's set of other people going to come in. And that just is not good because it also opens us up to foreign relations of other countries that are trying to, that are very anti-United States of America.
Right,
That's
let me
them.
answer that.
Okay.
First off, Trump secured the border. Biden was going to secure the border through a bipartisan bill, but Trump called all the Republican senators and representatives to don't do that because I want to do it. I want to take credit for it. But Trump secured the border.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as border crossings are concerned, we're clear there. That
Right.
precedent isn't going to move forward if the border is
Do you
secured.
agree with the border security?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Secondly, all right, the biggest problem because as I mentioned, the majority, or I think about 45%
of illegal, undocumented immigrants in the country are from overstaying their visas and such. So, securing the border doesn't solve that problem. However, what would solve that is removing red tape in actually naturalizing these citizens and having more immigration judges, which Trump is going to cap under the big beautiful bill. So if we addressed that, then that precedent wouldn't be set.
Okay. I mean, that's just a battle of extremity, how far you want to go based on what happened, how much of a standard you want to set. I think it's a good thing, the amount of standard. I think it's a good thing, the standard he set with the extremity he has set. He's setting it back, saying, hey, if you even try to come here illegal, it's also setting a precedent for other foreign nations that are anti-U.S., like I said, that even though our borders are closed, they might try to get in here and, like you said, overstay a visa. Just because our borders are closed doesn't mean you can't come in with a visa and overstay a visa. This thing can still happen even if our borders not open. It's very important because of, like I said, foreign nations just trying to get in. And like I said, he's making a statement saying that, hey, if you come here and you come here illegally, or you have any idea, any iota of ill will set towards what you're going to do here, that is not going to be accepted.
Okay, but ill will doesn't even matter either, because 93% didn't have violence convictions and 63 didn't have any convictions. They're just people.
Right.
And we're putting them in concentration camps, Coda.
They're going to... It's mainly the people that are committing crimes. He said this.
No, it's not, because those are statistics from ICE showing who we've already captured.
I'm talking about... You're talking about sending them away to prisons and stuff like that?
Yeah, no, these are people. Like, out of all the ICE detainees, 93 didn't have violent convictions.
Okay, but are you...
63 didn't have any convictions.
Okay,
and they're being put in camps.
We're not just talking about detainees. Those people can leave anytime they want. Like they've said before, they can leave at any time. They will pay for their ticket to get on a plane and go back to their home country. There's no reason for them to be here. And detainees doesn't mean we're putting them in camps. We are holding them for a period of time. And there's always going to be mishaps at that big of a scale. But I don't see the problem with us holding them for a period of time to send them back when they could go back at any time they want. And if they committed crimes, they're getting sent to Alligator Alcatraz to show them a lesson. And they can leave anytime there as well. It does not make any sense to me.
Why do you think people are coming into the country?
Obviously, it is for their misfortunes in their own country. Majority.
Right. Often caused by the United States. Right, and we can debate that later.
Okay.
However, we're putting them in camps, Coda. Like, you say we're not, but we are. And I have.
Do you think jail is camps? Do you think jails are camps?
I think, a fucking building in a marsh full of alligators.
It's not a building. It's a set of tents.
That's even worse.
That is not worse.
That is worse.
That is not worse.
Because there's no air conditioning.
There is air conditioning.
Humid. Okay, well, it's still humid as hell.
Okay, that's Florida. Do you think everybody in Florida is in jail? Do you think everybody in Florida is in a camp and being tortured? Florida's humid. Yeah, it's teaching them a lesson in harsh conditions.
But it's in the marshes, which tends to flood more. As we already said, there's already been flooding. And they're putting babies in there, dude.
I am 100% sure if they're putting babies in there, those babies are part of the families of people. Would you rather them split up the families?
I would rather them not be put in camps at all and not be split up. Why are those my only two options?
I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying when you ask me if they should be sending babies there, I'm saying it's part of their families. I would rather them do that than split up the families. Along with that, I think the camp, in my worldview, the camp is okay. And I think I'm saying from my worldview, those are my choices. And I make the choice.
That is true.
So I was presenting my worldview to you.
Right. That is still unethical, though. I don't... Coda, the point is...
What do you define as unethical? Define unethical for me.
Unfair, unjust. Unjust is the biggest one, right?
Okay.
And disrespectful. Those are the three biggest things. I took an ethics class.
What is justice? Are we talking legally? Are we talking what morality are we subscribing
Ethically.
to?
Like, is it fair? So let's take my favorite example. All right, Guatemala, right? The United States overthrew their democratically elected government in 1954.
putting them in a civil war and increasing poverty dramatically. That was our country who did that, right?
Okay.
People in Guatemala are like, hey, fuck it, I don't want to be here. I want to, have a decent life for myself and my family. So I come to the United States because the United States committed an unjust act towards my country, and I'm paying my taxes. I'm stimulating the
If you're
economy.
doing that, just come over legally. What's the issue with that?
That's what I was
Yes, it's
hoping you'd say.
hard. It's hard. I'm not saying we shouldn't make revisions to that. But
So why are we capping the immigration judges at 800? 800. That only stifles, you say come in legally,
because
then Trump's not helping in that at all. So it's still unjust.
I think that's half the coin. And yes, Trump may not be participating on the other half yet, but I'm saying a next president could. I'm saying Trump is starting something that has been lacking for quite a long time that other people are going to finish. You can't do much in a 4-year term. He's setting out to achieve certain things. Along with that, people are flawed. Trump is not a perfect president. I'm saying what he's focusing on is good. All right? I'm not saying what he's not focusing on is a good thing that he's not focusing on it. I'm saying what he is changing and focusing on is good compared to other presidents that have been the president.
Is it just for, an individual from a foreign country, a war-torn country, maybe one terrorized by the United States, many coups thanks to the CIA, to come into this country to live the American dream? Maybe they have tried coming legally. Maybe, they came in through a visa, but then, because of the constant failures in our bureaucracy, that maybe they aren't able to get their citizenship immediately, right? But, they're still paying their taxes. They're a member of the community. They're, maybe they'll help their neighbor mow their lawn. They stimulate the economy. They pay into taxes. They're not really committing crimes. And they've lived here years even, Is it just to send them away to start over? Kristi Noem tried to send them to Libya.
Right.
And we're putting them in a camp. And we're sending some to El Salvador.
Okay.
Is that just? Just answer that question.
Is it just that they are doing that? No. But do you want to know what? When you make a program and you're in the United States, you have 300 million people here. You make a program with our money, our budget, our worth in the world scale, and you have that program set forth, there are going to be some things that are 100% okay that are part of that program, but that program is still can be good. I'm saying that, yeah, that can be an example of one of them, but you can also have an example of somebody who's came here and raped 5 women and killed 5 people. And I would say
That's 7%.
yeah, but what percentage of those people are helping their neighbor, mowing their lawn, paying their taxes? You may say these people are paying their taxes, but they're not paying nearly as much as a normal person would that is participating in the market of the United States. And the more infiltration and muddling we have in the market of the United States, the worse off we are. I mean, capitalism does not thrive under people taking advantage of certain socialist tendencies.
Right, but they're not taking advantage of it because they are paying into taxes.
Not as much.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Billions of dollars. The poorest Americans, right, also don't pay that much
And
into
I
taxes.
hate that. I think they should not do that. If they don't have a job...
they don't pay that much into taxes because they don't have the money to pay that much into taxes. Taxation is theft.
You're sly. Anyways. No. Okay.
Taxation is theft. So
Okay.
you can't say
No,
you're
that's
upset
fair.
that they're
That's
not
fair.
paying enough
That's fair.
taxes if you think it's
You can
theft.
say taxation is theft. I think taxation is theft, yeah. But in the U.S., we need taxation for our current setup. So it is a required thing that may not be 100% morally correct. All right? In fact, in our framework, our founding fathers' framework, they had no idea of a society that could be ran off of no taxation because of the societies that were there before that. They were forefronts in thought in politics. Right? They were the revolutionaries in politics. They were at the forefront. They had no examples of these certain theoretical societies that could be set up without taxation.
Yeah.
So they have taxation set up. And taxation in their moral framework is perfectly okay. And I agree with that. And that's fine. And I'm saying that immigrants who come here and they don't contribute as much as normal people do. They're already here illegally. Why don't we just put them back where they came from? Yes, there's situations where they don't go back exactly where they came from, and that's a travesty. I think that's bad. And maybe if it happens, 2-3% of the time. That sucks. That really does. But it's the precedent that is set forward, the change of what I think of.
Look, I want to stick on that idea of precedent.
Okay.
Right? Okay, so let's say we set this precedent, we give amnesty to the ones now. We also tighten security in the border, which Trump already did. And I'm not going to get into, expanding the immigration process because Trump's not doing that. So that would be unfair. So let's say we give mass amnesty, right? So we set a precedent that people can come into the country illegally. Who the hell is that hurting? Again, who is it hurting, actually? Because as I've stated, citizens commit more crimes.
Just because they commit more crimes doesn't mean that the people come here should commit any crimes. We should have no people committing crimes that come here illegally. That is two things that have been mishandled by the government that have happened. And so he's trying to tighten that down and make that less apparent. And also, they can come here legally on visas and overstay their visas, like you said. So deportations are a good thing to fight that. You can come up with other ways to do it. But the thing is, when you're putting a policy forth in the government, so many things get changed, so many things get stretched, so many things change the specific idea that you wanted to put forth and change, that it's really hard to make a super efficient bill or something like that go into place to deport, people who are only doing bad things but are also illegal, and also maybe under these criteria they go away. It doesn't really work on the broad scale. So people who come over here overstay their visas, like you said, which is most of the people. Weren't the 9/11 terrorists here on visas?
Yeah.
Like,
So is Hannah.
okay, I'm saying this can happen, and the travesty that and the travesty that can come of it significantly outweighs the maybe one person that got dealt a bad hand, and the one unlucky person. You may think I'm being morally fucking terrible right now.
I don't think that.
But when you have such a broad scale, it just changes. It changes a lot of things.
Right, okay. But terrorism is going to happen regardless. I mean,
That's the
both-
gun
okay,
argument.
But second, right?
Okay.
Sorry, I actually forgot.
No, you're sorry. It was probably from me interrupting.
Point is, again, who are we really hurting by letting people in?
9/11.
Okay.
I'm just saying, man. I think we're hurting a lot of people. I think the possibility.
Yeah, but also 9/11 is a direct result of United States being involved in foreign policy that we shouldn't be
So
in.
you're saying just because you say we asked for 9/11,
I'm not saying we asked for it, but I'm saying that we bear some responsibility.
and what us limiting that reaction from a foreign nation to commit insane crimes in the U.S. is a bad thing?
Sorry, repeat that.
No, you're good. You're saying that it is not. Fuck. I don't know.
Look, I think
I lost track of thought.
I think we should, harm reduction is the goal, right?
This big harm reduction.
Harm reduction. How are we doing harm reduction if we're deporting 93% of people who have not committed, crimes, and 63% of
Because
people
they're
who
still
have not committed?
here illegally.
That's not
Every
real,
country
Soda.
deports people.
I'm not saying that's okay though. I don't,
Oh, so
I don't care if Libya or Bangladesh or Uzbekistan
or Spain or
Sp-
France or any
or
European
Europe,
nation.
I don't care if the UK is deporting people because I'm not British.
They're allowed to do
All right,
it. It's just
I'm American.
I'm giving an
currently
example
focused-
that all these other countries view it, so the majority of the population view it as a big enough worry to deport people and have programs that deport people if every other country does it.
I don't think that's a valid argument. I really don't think deportation is a good thing, and I don't think most people do. I think a lot of governments think it's do.
Why-
Governments, the people on top think it's
What do
do.
you
People
think the influence
benefit.
of that would be?
What do you mean?
What benefits are they getting from taking people out of their, from deporting illegal people in their government?
Othering. It displaces a responsibility that Americans need to take in paying their workers better, not having Congress people be lobbied, actually dealing with, you talk about reducing crime. Why do we have the prison industrial complex? It's shown to not work. We have the biggest prison population in the world, and crime still is not decreasing at a fast enough rate to warrant that. So what we're doing there is not taking responsibility for bad policy that has been set by Trump, by Kamala, by Biden, by every president before us, and we're displacing it on people who are not responsible for that.
Okay.
That's the problem, and that's what makes it fascism. Is that othering and aiming to be like, we need to be Americans,
America is so ethically and racially diverse, it doesn't even matter anymore. People who say Trump is fascist, they call him a post-racial fascist because of how insane of a claim it is to be that they are racially and ethically prosecutive. I don't know. But you didn't answer.
Right?
No. I was going to say, but you didn't really answer my question. What benefit does it give the politicians, the people at the top, to deport immigrants, put more money into this?
Because they don't bear the responsibility. That's what they benefit. They can keep, getting their money from AIPAC and from Chevron and from every major corporation. They can keep just doing that because they can just keep pushing the blame towards immigrants. That's what they're gaining.
Wouldn't immigrants working for these big companies lessen the cost of these companies, giving them more money and more lobbying?
No, because they're just going to hire other people and then they're not going to keep raising their wages either.
What?
Anyway, let me... I forgot what I was going to ask you before.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's okay. It has something to do. Oh, yeah. Okay, so you talk about this idea of like post-racial fascism. I'm assuming you're talking about this fascism isn't based on race necessarily, because we're an ethnically diverse country and racially diverse country.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that. Fascism is not based on race.
I know it's not. I agree.
But fascist dictators did use race as a thing, and I'm saying that can't exist today because of how racially diverse we are.
For sure.
You can say they're racist against ideologies, which I would contend is fair. If you have people who are, the religion of the Middle East that is really strict on women, and you have that come here. Not to the degree, and also modern Christianity completely disfavors that, completely. Along with that, you could make a contention and say that, normal gender roles are a good thing. But regardless, what I was trying to say, if somebody comes in here from a foreign nation, the Middle East, and they come and they implement the same religion hardcore, they run a massive propaganda campaign as a GOP, as a NGO, right? They run a massive propaganda campaign. All of a sudden, all these women are being extremely prosecuted, even if they don't believe in the religion. Then would you say that civilization, what's the word I'm looking for?
Islam.
No, culture. That culture coming here is a good thing. Yeah, it's an ideology. We can't accept all the ideologies in the U.S. anyways.
Okay,
it's
right. A, that's not happening. B, you know what it is happening? A 135% uptick in Asian hate crimes. A 47% uptick in Latino hate crimes.
And that is not. How do you draw the correlation? Rhetoric.
So, since the Civil Rights Act, and actually throughout all of American history, violent crimes towards, Asian people, women, Hispanic, and African American people have lowered constantly until Trump. That's when we start seeing that uptick with his rhetoric, his nationalistic rhetoric that claims that immigrants, which again, I'm not going around to every brown person being like, are you undocumented or not? So, a lot of people are just going to be like, that brown person, they could be an immigrant. It's reasonable that they cross the border. That rhetoric is what spouts this idea that Hispanic people are rapists and racist or leeching off the welfare system. So I'm going to hurt them to defend my country. That's the rhetoric imposed by Trump. Because Trump also hasn't addressed these things. If Trump actually cared about, any of these minority groups, he would have addressed it, wouldn't he have?
Nor has any other government administration. Along with that, just because Trump is successful...
Obama's did, Biden's did.
What did they address? Are you talking about addressing LGBTQ things? Because those hate crimes weren't happening.
No, I'm talking specifically about Asian American crimes because, the uptick due to the pandemic was addressed by Biden. Obama addressed black crimes. Kennedy, even if that is a long time ago, addressed these things.
Okay.
Bush didn't, but he was a Republican. Trump didn't because he's a Republican. Reagan didn't because what's the pattern, guys?
Whenever you have a successful change, a big change in government policy, especially, again, something as big as the U.S., you're going to have people that take that to the extreme that usually aren't even ideologically clued in on the ideology they're supporting and committing this crime for. All right? These people that you say are Republicans are probably more so pyromaniacs and fucking sociopaths that are just saying that this is the reason that they're doing it, when reality, anything would have set them off. Just because Trump is successful in his changes that he's made in America and has actually caused diversity, doesn't mean that you should blame him for certain things happening based on the lie of the one second. The lie of the knowledgeable voter. Like, it's...
Why do the upticks resemble Trump's patterns? There wasn't a spike in Asian hate crime when he was first inaugurated. It only happened when COVID hit. There wasn't a spike in Latino crimes until Trump started campaigning on the border and immigration.
Because of the adjacentness of these topics. It happens. People are going to draw connections themselves. And based off of one clip Trump says in a news interview after he's had a whole day of presidency and is probably really tired and drowsy, people are going to take that and run with it and say, oh, I need to go commit a hate crime now. That are sociopaths. Just because this happens doesn't mean that Trump is responsible for every single person in America.
But they match up in the timeline.
Okay,
the rhetoric,
I explained why they match up. I'm not going to deny it.
Look, the rhetoric influences this, and Trump doesn't back down. Again, it's not based on any logical reasoning because, immigrants coming in, majority of them are not rapists, the majority of them are not leeching off of welfare, the majority of them are not doing all these horrible things that Trump is telling the constituency that they are. So, it's not based on logic, it's not based on reasoning, but he keeps spouting it. He keeps doing it. He did it in 2016, and he did it in 2024, and he did it in 25. If, he's tired, and it was just a slip up, a little goof, then why does he keep doing it? Like, why does he
Because
keep
he has to
happening?
double down as a politician. Anytime you retract one of your statements as a politician, that makes you significantly less favorable towards people. And again, this is a problem with democracy. I'm not going to deny that, but I'm saying that what he has done has been much better than what the Kamala Harris campaign would have done tenfold.
That's just a direct result of Leban's appealing to the crowd through emotion, which Mussolini used.
So did every other, especially democracy. A politician is known for being paid for, bought out, morally great. Every single politician in democracy does that. You can't, he's not different in any way.
But the difference is that we're scapegoating communities. We're scapegoating the transgender community, which you haven't touched on, which I'm sure...
The Democratic Party scapegoat the white community. Like, what do you mean?
Oh, the white community.
Yeah.
Give me examples.
What do you mean, give you examples?
Give me examples.
Kamala Harris had a whole last-ditch effort of her campaign to appeal to white young men because of how much they had been significantly, denied in the Democratic Party. She had a whole, she has, these people, these really smart people that are tracking the favorableness of a person based on what, this, that, and those people told her, hey, you need to run part of your campaign based on white young men. Why is this? Because they denied a lot of white community. They denied a lot of white, what's that word again? Culture. It's
What's so important about white culture, Coda?
What do you mean what's so important about it? I'm not saying it's important. I'm saying that they use that as a scapegoat. In fact, it's more of the population that they use as a scapegoat than Trump has. I'm saying it's happened everywhere in politics.
How does the Democratic Party specifically alienate white people? Because is it that the Democratic Party alienates white people, or is it that the Republican Party appeals to white people?
Both.
Both are different. No,
it's
they're
both.
different. Because, like I said, Trump's rhetoric, right, is based off of this idea that these people are ruining your culture, right, like you mentioned, and bringing crime into this. So they're rallying white people, the homegrowns, to be like, hey, We don't want them here.
Yeah.
It's appealing to their fears. It's fear-mongering. It's fascism.
And the Democratic Party is saying, hey, black gay woman, come here. We need you in our administration because fuck the rich white cis man.
That's why Biden was the president.
I'm saying it's both.
But then how
Biden was the president because they could take advantage of him extremely easily and coerce him.
Then why did they want to run Buttigieg? I mean, there's tons of white Democrats. The reason the Democratic Party...
I'm not saying there's not. I'm saying they appeal to a certain audience, and you're saying they appeal to a certain audience. I'm not siding with either current political ideology. I'm just saying what Trump has done is not different from any other president ever.
Why
almost.
is it comparable even, but why is it worse that, maybe one party doesn't appeal... What's up?
Finish your
Okay. One party doesn't appeal to white people compared to one party alienates minority communities who have been disadvantaged through our country's entire history. Why is that one more like, we should think about both equally? It's equity, it's not equality, and equity matters. These people are being disadvantaged more than white people have in the entire history of America, except maybe when the British were trying to take care of us, but they were also white. So why is that worse? Why are we putting so much stock on Kamala being like, I'm anti-white, when she really isn't, to Trump being like, hey, these people, I'm making lies about them constantly. My rhetoric influences violence. For no real reason. It's not based on any logic, and it's damaging our communities. I had a coworker who constantly berated me. He would call me a beaner, and he would be like, hey, and he would be like, I can't wait till Trump, gets in office because then, all my Uber drivers are going to speak English. And there's, how is that okay? I hope you realize I'm Hispanic, Coda. I shouldn't have to deal with that. Should I? Really? Should I have to go into work being berated by my coworkers over the color of my skin? I'm a citizen. I was born here. How is that fair? How is that just? You can't answer that. You haven't been able to answer that. Because it's not just. And it's fascism. And that's my question.
All right, what were you going to say?
what's going on? Timer starts now.
How do you justify the increase in political violence and the fact that Donald Trump has done almost nothing to address it?
By it not being necessarily directly related, and by him not being responsible for everyone in America.
Okay. How do you justify the blatant attacks on transgender individuals that are not based in any science or any real facts?
By attacks, do you mean him making it not federally recognized?
Yeah, but also, historical revisionism, removing the T, because it's based on the rhetoric.
I don't think a trans ideology needs to be recognized by the federal government. Why do you think that why do you think it needs to be recognized by the federal government?
Can he ask that? Is that part of his rebuttal?
No, okay.
You're just answering.
I'm just answering.
I'll answer that. but-
Oh, we're doing 2 minutes each? Oh, okay, never mind.
Okay. All right. Do you still think it's just to deport people who really haven't done much wrong aside from a civil violation? You didn't want to pay your parking ticket as a policeman.
I did pay my parking ticket, and I still think it is because it's the precedent set by the government, and it needs to be stated upon and be congruent. It needs to be congruent with what it's said, even if it's a lesser case.
Do you recognize that there has been an uptick in violence against, minority groups, like Asian Americans, and Hispanic Americans, and transgender Americans? That is, alongside Trump's rhetoric with those groups. Do you recognize that?
Tangentially, yes. Tangentially, yes.
Okay.
Finish your. Did you finish your?
Yeah, he answered.
Alright. Now we switch. You ready?
Okay, I think so.
Okay. Timer starts now.
Why do you think Kamala Harris would have done something different in our prosperity and foreign relations?
Foreign relations?
Yes.
Well, the Biden administration already focused on, developing those relationships with Ukraine, but also every country that's part of the Mineral Security Partnership. She didn't bully around her allies. So.
Do you think that our affiliation with Ukraine is a good or bad thing?
I think.
And what we did with
that. That's complicated. I think it's. I don't think we should be there, but I think overall it is a good thing.
Do you still think that Trump is... Well, hold on, let me ask a different question. Do you think that Trump's administration is fascist, or they have fascistic tendencies?
I think they have fascistic tendencies.
Okay.
But I think Trump is a fascist.
Do you think if it was more so behind closed doors, like Trump isn't as open wide with exactly what he's doing, do you think it would have caused this much diversion and if it wasn't Trump and he wasn't this vocal about the stuff he did, do you think it would still cause this much discourse and diversity among political?
I don't think it would have, but that's a reality we're not living in.
Do you think? All right. Do you think it's how open Trump is about his policies and his interviews and stuff that he does? Do you think that is something you would prefer in a presidential candidate? Or
I think that's his best trait.
Okay.
I want to talk about the things, firstly, that Coda failed to address in the debate, which, some benefit, there were a lot of things to address, right? Coda failed to directly address the fact that we are cutting $1 trillion in Medicaid over the next decade. That is going to disadvantage thousands of Americans. We say, we're doing this immigration policy to help Americans, but we're also going to cut Medicaid funding and hurt the most disadvantaged people in our society. So that. He also failed to address that the bill adds $3 trillion to the deficit. That's going to affect everyone. That's going to affect our kids, especially. Speaking of kids, he also failed to address the fact that the bill would cut billions of dollars in funding towards Planned Parenthood, which, as we agreed, is extremely important for women's health. Not even women, but also men, because men get STDs too. Men use condoms also, it turns out. Actually, they use most. So, fun fact there. So, Coda failed to address those parts of the bill. Right? Secondly, Coda failed to directly address the fact that there is an uptick in, this violence towards transgender individuals perpetuated by Trump's rhetoric. It's not coincidence the fact that these upticks in violence happen alongside his rhetoric. The fact that, look, maybe it doesn't need to be federally recognized that there are two sexes, but science recognizes that there are, and by federally recognizing that there are only two sexes, we're putting at disadvantage a whole group of people, and we're setting them up for more violence and more struggles in, gaining workplace protections. Iowa has already banned or has prevented trans people from, being able to sue if they get fired for being trans. So, Coda fails to address that point. Coda also fails to address the fact, actually, I'm going to get to that in a second. Coda agrees to some extent that the policy against immigrants is unjust. It is unethical because the majority of them do not commit crimes. Even more of them don't commit violent crimes. So what we're seeing is that we're just getting average people trying to do their best. You have one life, may I remind you, to do what you can to build a life for yourself and a future for your kids and their kids. And Trump's administration directly hampers the ability of those peoples to do that. For what? For political gain. So that Trump and all the Congress people and every major government can avoid responsibility for what's actually damaging Americans, such as, adding $3 trillion to the deficit and cutting trillions of dollars in Medicaid. Those things need to be addressed. But because we're kicking out the rapist illegals, we're not focusing on those things. That's the fascism, is the fact that we're still scapegoating these communities who don't need that. They've been terrorized enough by our governments. That hundreds of Central American and South American countries have been the victims of coups by the United States in the effort for money. Coda talks about, the Middle East and our presence there being beneficial for commerce. People are dying. What good does that commerce do if these people are dead, or if these people are working 9 to 5s, miserable and depressed their whole lives because they can't, maybe afford health care? What are we doing there? We're not addressing the real issues. And most importantly, is that Coda fails to address the rising amount of far-right extremist violence in our country. The fact that Donald Trump is not doing enough to address the real terrorism going on in our country, perpetuated by our citizens, the ones who want this white nationalist identity. I don't think Trump is a white supremacist, but it so happens that the white supremacists fucking love Trump. Why is this not being addressed? This is hurting real Americans, and it's undermining our democracy, because we've got judges, we've got Congress people who are constantly receiving threats. They're gonna bend it to Trump's knee. If these people are fearing for their lives and their families' lives, of course they're just going to do what Trump's doing. That's why our Congress has been so ineffective, because they're constantly being riddled with violent threats against their lives by far-right extremists. And Trump doesn't do it. It's not like Trump's being like, hey, you guys should go do this. It's that Trump is not addressing it and then further legitimizing it by pardoning the January 6th insurrectionists. That's fascism. And the only reason Coda asked me if I think the Trump administration currently is fascistic, I said no, I think it only resembles fascism. And part of that is because we've had a democracy endure for at least 250 years. That's the only thing keeping us from that. But this violence, this idea that I don't want to vote the way I want to vote because I might get killed or I might get hurt or I might get attacked, that undermines that democracy. And then we lose that democracy. Germany had a democracy, and then they got Hitler. So, Trump's 80-something now. He's probably going to die, but he's already sowed the seeds for that destruction. He's already sowed the seeds for that violence. And the next administration, if we're not careful with who we vote for, they could be the real fascists. And Trump made that easier for them. That's it.
All right. Closing statement is, my opponent has failed to, I would present him as kind of an idealist. My opponent has failed to recognize the contextual depth that goes along with politics, hate crimes, civilization, philosophy, etc. This is for many reasons. Some of them are related to what he brought up, the hate crimes, things like that. These things happen all the time, and a lot of these people that are committing hate crimes would have committed hate crimes anyways. They just threw it to a random reason based off of, whatever their current lifestyle was like. Along with that, Medicaid and Medicare being cut to all of these people, it's a straw man to what is actually happening. What's happening is that they are pandering it more so to people who actually work and try to do something for a living, stimulating the economy, these things. It cuts this money over 10 years, and it's honestly going to be very beneficial and very motivational to certain people who live off of welfare. It's a very good thing. I would say that people benefiting off the system like that, it is a big percentage of people, and it really just promotes degenerosity in our civilization. Also, my opponent failed to recognize the entire agenda of Doge. What you guys may think of that may vary, but Doge did a lot of things and saved us a lot of money. And I will concede that it was not as much money as it will cost for certain things in Trump's bill, but I will say that it was very helpful, and he's still trying to compete in many different areas. This is very apparent in all of his policies. When you nitpick certain little negative things that are just thrown to a reason, such as politics. You know, a lot of people say they do things out of political volition. It's not true. These people, again, they've done these things anyways. It's also, politics is messy. You know, you're never going to have a perfect president, and especially in democracy, it's very, gray, but you have to choose the lighter gray over the darker gray. And I still fully 100% believe that Kamala Harris would have done a terrible job for the economy, for foreign relations, and for anything else that Giovanni named. I think she would have made foreign relations even worse than Joe Biden did. Joe Biden talked to basically no other governments and countries across the world. He was terrible at it, and I know that she would only continue that because she was the sitting vice president during that time. He cut off our drilling, which was detrimental to the economy, and now Trump is bringing it back in full swing. And you may say what you want about green energy. Green energy isn't great. Nuclear energy is the better one out of those two, and I think we should focus on nuclear energy. Regardless, it's been proven in theory multiple times, logistically, that we are not going to crash ourselves through greenhouse gases and through these things that hinder us in our in the nature. And capitalism actually takes care of a lot of these worries, because companies at the end of the day are out for themselves, and when they're out for themselves, they're going to be out for their environment. They put a lot of forethought into these things. They pay a lot of people to put a lot of forethought into these things. I think it's going to happen. Nuclear is developing great. Trump actually appointed an amazing Department of Energy candidate, and he is all for nuclear. So honestly, I think everything that Giovanni named really has not been either done somewhere else, is not worse than what the other party would have done, and he still never addressed the fact that this is change. This is something that Trump is introducing that a lot of the Democratic Party would not have, and he is inducing a realization in a lot of people that we need change. We need a lot of change in a lot of our policies, especially from the results of the previous candidacy. And with that, I think I've stated my case. Thank you guys for watching. Abel.
When you guys were talking about the whole situation with Canada and Greenland, Coda was of the opinion that many of the residents would actually like to be assimilated into the United States, saying that they would like to reap the benefits. What benefits? What are they getting?
Okay. I think they're getting a lot of things. I think they are getting, first off, assurance in a lot of their freedoms, because right now they're under the governance of Denmark, and they hate Denmark. They fucking hate Denmark. Like, if you look at, they fucking hate Denmark. And they have a affiliation, freedom of association with the U.S., and they can also reap a lot of the trading benefits. It's going to make their country, if it were to happen, it would make their country a lot more prosperous economically, things like this, etc.
I have a question for you.
Yeah. I might have to speak up, because
Yeah, I just gotta phrase it correctly.
I can get close.
Get closer.
We can just join the table.
That is true.
Yeah.
I'm going to start.
Club, gang.
Why is everyone on that side?
No one wants to sit with us. Oh, there we go.
Well, they're my groupies.
Yeah,
Groupies.
you should have came and sat by us.
I do not associate with this man.
What right do immigrants, the illegal, not legals, have to enter our country, and why do they avoid any personal responsibility for entering illegally? Why do we have to deal with that in the first place if they are in here illegally?
I feel like, is it okay if I ask him 2 really questions just to clarify?
Yeah.
Just like clarifying questions.
Yeah.
What do you mean by deal with?
Deport. Why do we have to bear the burden of not only do we have to provide food, shelter, if they don't have a job, we have to provide money, we have to pay for those things. So we have to take care of them, assuming they're not contributing. Why should we have to devote our resources to them when they entered illegally? Because they're imposing their burden of our tax dollars to pay for them when we didn't want them here in the first place. We're not consenting to pay for that.
Okay. They pay taxes, so
Do all of them?
Yeah, most of them do. Anyone who purchases anything is paying taxes. So,
Okay.
A, they are paying taxes, so they are also, feeling that burden. And B, we don't have to deport them. We can just not deport them. I, brought up mass amnesty as a solution, and we can do that. We said we have to deport them.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I think that's
Answer my
next
question. That's fine.
You can ask more if you want.
Can I address a question to both of them? Is that something?
Yeah, you can talk
okay.
to both of them.
So, a lot of things that we've seen with past fascist regimes, such as Mussolini or Hitler, is the kind of disassemblement of the administrative state, similar to what Doge has done, where they cut a lot of the benefits and they cut a lot of the things that regulate, functions of society, and then a consolidation of power into the arm of whoever is in charge, that being in the United States, the executive, which has come recently with the Supreme Court ruling saying that injunctions cannot be, enforced nationwide.
I think you're
Basically,
giving me too much of an answer to your question.
oh,
Or,
sorry.
Everything you said I could answer with.
Sorry.
Well,
Yeah.
you keep going. Keep going.
So I'm just asking, are we seeing kind of we might not be in a fascist regime yet, but are we seeing kind of the beginning of a fascist regime coming towards us?
I think it's likely, and I think a lot of it has to do with, that violence from the right being perpetuated against, our judges and members of Congress. So the judiciary and the legislative, which consolidates power, like you said, into the executive branch. And then, like you said, Doge, and then also attempts to, disband the Department of Education, again, puts more power into whoever wants that power, which might be Trump.
The question was for me too, right?
Yes, for
Okay.
you as well.
I would say absolutely not. I mean, the lessening power of the states has been happening since the Civil War. If a fascist regime would have happened, it would have happened by now. Just with the lessening of power from the states, that's been a common thing throughout, political discourse for a very long time. And I don't see it coming to fruition necessarily soon, but I do think it will be something that will need to be addressed at some point. And I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing that's happening, but I'm saying that Trump is not the direct cause of it. It's been happening for a long time.
Okay, can I just clarify something? I'm not talking about federalism as in the federal government and the state power. I'm talking about the administrative state as a whole, that's being, what the federal government and state governments provide to their citizens, not...
So you're saying the states
what
should
the
be...
states. No, I'm saying that they're repealing like weather services recently that provide services to the public from the federal government, and that is something that we've seen with Hitler and Mussolini, who also did a similar thing.
So they're doing more things within the states and essentially taking more
No,
power
they're not
from the
doing
states.
more things within the states. What they're doing is
You're saying
they're just taking
programs.
everything from the public sector. Basically, they're kind of trying to privatize things. I
Oh,
believe,
you're
is
trying to say
what
they're privatizing everything?
it's a similar process where they're cutting programs which could possibly in the future be privatized. But for
Yeah,
now, they're
I
just
mean,
caught.
I hate socialist tendencies. You know, I think more things should be privatized. Yeah, absolutely. I think very little things should be public. Very, very little. And the private sector does so much better than government. Government bureaucracy always muddles it. Always makes it worse. There's so much crap in there. Yeah, that's my answer.
Oh,
Y'all think of Elon?
It's a whole different thing. That's not even a specific question.
What do you say?
No, I think that's a valid.
What's your general opinion on Elon Musk?
I think he is.
What do you think of the guy?
He's really cool. But I don't think he should have been involved with the government. I really don't. I don't think he should have been involved with the government at all. In fact, I said this as soon as my parents started talking about it. I said, having the richest man in the world be a part of the government is kind of iffy. It's a slippery slope. It can become a bad thing. But I think the inventions he's made have been insanely cool. And for
Cyber.
what do you say?
Gio has an
Cyber.
answer. Gio has an answer.
I think Elon Musk. No, I don't think. I know he did a Nazi salute on national television.
yeah, 2 of them.
Elon Musk also supports the far-right party in Germany, which has advocated for things such as revisionist history against the Holocaust and removing any judgments on the German people, and instead being like, hey, the Jews kind of deserved it a little. So when Sarah Weber, I think, ran in Germany for that far-right party, and she won some seats, and Elon congratulated her on X. So I saw that. I think Elon is also, staunchly anti-America, and also, I mean, man, he really fucked himself here. Where do you think he's gonna go? No one else wants him. Asia doesn't want him because they've got far superior technology. South Africa has nothing to gain from him. Central America has nothing to gain from him. Europe fucking hates him. Hey, Russia's there. He got access to a ton of government secrets. Just go be like, hey, Russia, I know a thing or two about you.
Let me restate myself. I don't think Elon's cool. I think his inventions are cool. Is what I.
His what is cool?
His inventions and his
His
companies are
inventions
cool.
are cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good question.
Cybertruck is really cool, guys.
It is. Okay, honestly, I will fucking defend the Cybertruck forever. You guys can have some questions without that, right?
I don't know, man. Have you watched the donut video on that?
I've watched all the videos on it. I still think it was a
That thing
revolutionary
died.
technology.
Revolutionary.
Yeah, so did the Subarus, but everybody still likes Subaru.
They were using a Toyota 4Runner. And that thing's seated by
It's a 4Runner. Anyways.
That thing's like a 20-year-old car.
Yeah,
The guy
4Runners are
in
known
it.
for running for like 500,000 miles. Anyways,
That was a normal
I feel like
Tesla.
if you're gonna ask
They're all
more than
fucking
one
suck.
question, it should go around a little. Like someone else should ask a question.
does like everyone have
Agreed.
questions?
I don't know.
Unless no one else wants to ask a question, I guess you can ask a question.
Go ahead.
Rico Brown, you
Just a judge.
Both of y'all.
What do you say?
Both of y'all. Do you think Trump incited the January 6th riots? Do you think he wanted them to happen?
Do I think it was an insurrection?
Or do you think that he encouraged
That's a
them?
strong man.
Do I think he encouraged them?
Yeah. Did he like encourage the rioters to go storm the
I
Capitol?
guess would
think
it
he
be?
caused
Do you
it?
think he did anything with it? Not that if
Do I think
you
he did?
agree that he did.
Like if I would absolutely.
because I think he phrased it like
I absolutely would say, yeah, he was the one that had them go there. I mean, he was the one that started, the protest. It was, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, I agree with Coda. Like he did do that. I mean, he was the guy who tweeted during the whole thing. Mike Pence didn't have the guts to do what he had to do, as in, overturn the election results. So
He also tweeted to do it peacefully. Just
he
saying.
tweeted peacefully. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, he also tweeted what you said.
Yeah, that's a good point. But then they built gallows.
And then they what?
They built gallows.
Enchanted hang Mike Pence.
Yeah. So clearly one of them had a stronger effect than the other.
I would say the three biggest protests in U.S. history have happened under Trump's presidency, and each of them caused immensely more amount of damage than anything on January 6th.
I wonder if Trump was never in office, if those wouldn't have happened then.
Again, he's not responsible for everybody in the U.S.
It's his country. I'm confused.
No, he's responsible for the bureaucracy part.
Damn, you loaded it quick. I got
Bureaucracy
one more
does
guy.
also him.
That's covered.
Never mind. We're not gonna get into it. We're gonna be here for like 3 years.
Do you think the 2020 election was actually stolen?
Define stolen.
What he said. He said what did he say? I just know he said they stole it.
So like fraudulent.
Yeah, fraudulent.
There were fraudulent stuff that happened in that election, but I'm sure there's fraudulent stuff that's happened in many elections in the U.S. It could have been more so with that one, and it could have been close enough to where the fraudulency did overturn it. I'm not entirely sure.
I got one more question. Why are you gay?
Why am I gay? I can't fucking hear you.
Why are you gay? Why do you like boys so much?
I
Must
like
be at
they're
least
hanging. I like how it hangs.
I like.
It's like a pendulum. I want you.
I like how it gets mesmerized.
Newton's cradle.
Why am I gay? No, the other. Oh.
We already know you're
Do
gay.
I think the 2020 election was stolen? Well, you know, tons of judges would disagree that it was stolen, so I don't think it was stolen.
Tons of judges would disagree that it was stolen.
No, they would disagree that it was stolen.
Oh, a
Because
lot of
they-
judges would disagree with his 34 felonies too.
I guess, but you think he is innocent? You think he is innocent? That's enough questions, Edwin. Does anyone else have more questions? Or?